They're like, he's like, I don't know if I should tell you guys. And we do this sometimes when we're speaking to each other. Like when we want people's attention, be like, man, I don't know if I should share, or I don't know if you guys want to hear this, right?
And putting importance.
Right, putting importance. So either of these is a possibility, right? The fact that he sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to show importance and give importance to it, and he wanted their undivided attention, or the other possibility is that he didn't want them to rely on this action alone just to take care of their bad deeds. And Allah knows best. So over here, Imam Nawawī, he said that one benefit that he takes out of this, he says that this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet's statement, الطهور الذي كتب الله عليه, that this wudu or this purification that an individual does, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had written for him, he said فإنه دال على من اقتصر في وضوئه على طهارة الأعضاء الواجبة وترك السنن المستحبات كانت هذه الفضيلة حاصلة له. So he says that even if you fall short in some of these actions, that you still are still not obligated, but you still attain this virtue. You still get this benefit. And he says, وَإِنْ كَانَ مَنْ أَتَى بِالسُّنَنْ أَكْمَلْ وَأَشَدْ تَكْفِيرًا. So he says that if an individual does this, takes more care and does this more completely, then the amount of sins that he will be forgiven is greater. So he said that even if we fall short in this, we're still forgiven, and the one who does it more completely, he has more sins that are forgiven for him, and Allah knows best.
So this hadith is under tahara. Does that mean you have to, in order to achieve this benefit, you have to do wudu for every prayer?
No. So over here, he doesn't say for every prayer. He says, ما من مسلم يطهر فيتم الطهور الذي كتب الله عليه فيصلي هذه الصلوات الخمس. So he is not saying here that you have to make a wudu for every salah, but you have to be on tahur.
Yeah, okay.
Right? That's it. That's all he's saying. Is that as long as you're purifying yourself, then this individual will be forgiven, and this will be an expiation for him. That's it. And this was my understanding from what he sallallahu alaihi wasallam has to say here. Tahur is a purity. So an individual who stays in a state of purity, meaning that, right? So because for the salawat, you have to wudu, right? You have to have wudu. You have to be in a state of purity. There are other fala'il. I don't know if the hadith are coming in Muslim, but the one who maintains their wudu, right? But that's a different fadila. Over here, he is just talking about the one who is on purity when he makes his prayers. So usually for us, when sometimes we'll make wudu maybe twice, 3 times a day, depending. And on one wudu we might make multiple salawat, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, inshallah. And this individual will be given that reward. Bi-idhnillah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us all. قال حدثنا عبيد الله بن معاذ قال حدثنا أبي وتحويل الإسناد وحدثنا محمد بن المثنى وابن بشار قال حدثنا محمد بن جعفر قال جميعا حدثنا شعبة عن جامع بن شداد قال سمعت حمران بن أبان يحدث أبا بردة في هذا المسجد. So over here, Humran, he says that I heard Abu Burda say in this masjid, the masjid that they're in, في إمارة Bishr, and this is when Bishr was the governor of that space of that time. أن عثمان ibn Affan قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, that Uthman ibn Affan, he said that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم said, من أتم الوضوء كما أمره الله تعالى, that whoever completes the wudu as Allah had ordered him, فالصلوات المكتوبات كفارات لما بينهن. So over here, he separates the two. He says that the one who completes their wudu as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stated, meaning from the Quran, right? We said that the ayat wudu are one of the few ayat that are very clear in terms of the ahkam and how to make wudu. And he said, فالصلوات المكتوبات كفارات. He says then the 5 prayers and what is between them are a expiation for all of his sins. What is between them. هذا حديث ابن معاذ وليس فيه حديث غندر في إمارة بشر ولا ذكر المكتوبات. So over here he says that what is unique about this narration is that you have a number of people narrating this hadith, and in one of the narrators he says that he doesn't mention the fact that it was Bishr's governorship at the time, and he says that he doesn't mention the 5 obligatory prayers. It says فَالصَّلَوَاتِ مَكْتُوبَات. So instead he says فَالصَّلَوَاتِ كَفَارَات لِمَا بَيْنَهُنْ. But regardless, the meaning being the same. This is just Imam Muslim's way to be precise in what he narrates and make sure, like, he even will show the difference in the wordings between the different ahadith. قال حدثنا هارون ابن سعيد الأيلي قال حدثنا ابن وهب قال أخبرني مخرمة ابن بكير عن أبيه عن حمران مولى عثمان قال توضأ عثمان بن عفان يوما وضوءا حسنا. So Humran, he says that Uthman was making wudu and he made it complete, like it was exceptional that day. ثم قال رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم توضأ فأحسن الوضوء. He said that I saw the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم perfecting his wudu. ثم قال من توضأ هكذا, that whoever makes this wudu ثم خرج إلى المسجد لا ينهزه إلا الصلاة. He says that, and the individual who then after making this wudu goes to the masjid, and the only thing that causes him or pushes him to go to the masjid, غُفِرَ لَهُ مَا خَلَى مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ, that he is forgiven of all of his previous sins. So over here, the hadith is talking about the individual who is going to the masjid. There are other hadith that we will come to, where the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions the one who makes wudu, and the one who walks to the masjid, and the one who prays in the masjid, that he will be given bid'ah or shirin, 22 rewards, 25 rewards, 27 rewards, right? There's different multiplications, different narrations mention different amounts of how much an individual will be rewarded for their prayer. And there are different fada'il and different virtues for each stage. For the one who makes the wudu, for the one who walks to the masjid, for the one who waits until the salah begins, and the one who actually goes and prays, right? So each action raises that person's rank. And from them, this is a part of that, is that an individual makes wudu with the intention of going to the masjid and praying. قال وحدثني أبو طاهر ويونس بن عبد الأعلى قال أنبأنا عبد الله بن وهب أن عمر ابن الحارث أن الحكيم ابن عبد الله القرشي حدثه أن نافع ابن جبير وعبد الله بن أبي سلمة حدثاه أن معاذ بن عبد الرحمن حدثهما عن حمران مولى عثمان بن عفان عن عثمان بن عفان. So over here, same chains of narrations where we have all going back to Humran. Humran, like we said, is the servant of Uthman, and he narrates that Uthman radiallahu anhu said, قال سمعت الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول, that I heard the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم say, من توضأ للصلاة فأسبغ الوضوء ثم مشى إلى الصلاة المكتوبة. He says that whenever an individual or whoever makes wudu for prayer and he completes his wudu, then he walks to the obligatory prayer. He walks to the obligatory فَصَلَّاهَا مَعَ النَّاسِ, that he prays with the people, أو مع الجماعة, or in a congregation, أو في المسجد, or in a masjid, غَفَرَ اللَّهُ لَهُ ذُنُوبَهُ. So over here, how is this different than the previous hadith? So he says that he walks to the prayer and he prays it with people, or he prays it in a congregation. Yeah, this is obligatory prayer, right? Or he prays with the people, or he prays in congregation, or he prays it in the masjid. غَفَرَ اللَّهُ لَهُ ذُنُوبَهُ, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives him of his sins. So
the first one was just make a perfect wudu.
And go where? And go to the masjid, right? Specifically going to the masjid. And this hadith, right, anywhere, right? As long as you're praying in a congregation. طيب, we'll get to it in Kitab al-Salah, but basically the obligation or going to the masjid for congregational prayer, is it something that is recommended, or is it something that is obligated? It's something that's recommended. This is in agreement with all four madhahib that it is recommended to go to the masjid. That recommendation applies to both men and women.
Why
I'm sorry.
Hanafi, I know.
Yeah, they're special.
They're special, right?
I don't know if it's the madhab or if it's like the subcontinent version of the madhab.
Is Hanafi
Yeah. They won't even have places to pray for women in the masajid. Yeah. No, I know. I'm very well aware. But here the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't specify if it applies to women. And he told Umar radiallahu anh, he says that, يعني, شو الحديث? He said, لا تمنع إماء الله من مساجد الله. He says, don't prohibit women from attending the masjid. Meaning that there's virtue for them attending. Obviously the excuses that they have, because they're responsible for the families, are more. But at the end of the day, anyone who goes to the masjid to pray in jama'ah will be rewarded, inshallah. Saying that, it's very clear from these ahadith that it's not necessary to go to the masjid and pray. It is just, or I don't mean to diminish that. Right.
It is recommended for high reward.
Right, but it's something that's recommended. I remember in Ramadan one time, somebody had asked me, like, what is the ruling on going to the masjid for jama'ah? And I was like sunnah, it's recommended. And one brother stood up and he was like, he's like, Shaykh, how could you say that it's an obligation? How could you say it's a sunnah and blah blah? I was like, let me ask you a question. He's like, what? I was like, are you going to bring to me the hadith of Ibn Maktum, where where the Prophet ﷺ said to him, "Atasma' nida," like, do you hear the adhan? Because he said, "Ya Rasulullah, do I need to go to the masjid?" And Ibn Maktum very famously was blind, and the Prophet ﷺ said no initially, and then he waited a moment, and then he said to Ibn Maktum, he said, "Atasma' nida," like, do you hear the adhan? He said yes. He said, then you have to go. I said, you're going to use this hadith? He was like, yes. I said, this hadith is one that is in Tirmidhi, and the hadith before it is about combining, the Prophet ﷺ combining without khawf, without matar. Yani there was no fear and there was no rain. I said, these are hadith, Imam Tirmidhi, he said, laysa alayhi al-amal. He said that these are hadith are not to be acted on. I was like, huh, what do you think about that? Yeah, I was like, huh, what do you think? And I was like, but what about the second hadith? He was like, and I was like, the one where the Prophet ﷺ said that I would have ordered someone to lead the prayer and I would have burned the homes, right? And he was like, yeah. I said, okay. I said, this. So the hadith is where the Prophet ﷺ, he said that had it not been for the women and children, I would have appointed one of you to lead the prayer and burn the homes of those who didn't attend. Very strong wording, right? So in that hadith, the scholars have explained it in one of two ways. He said either, number one, he was talking about Salatul Jumu'ah, giving that the importance, and there's no doubt that Salatul Jumu'ah is an obligation for men. Or he was talking about the munafiqeen, meaning that he wasn't talking about the general Muslim. So, and I said, on top of all of this, I said, Yahi, the entire ummah up until this point, all the madahib say that going to salat in the masjid is a sunnah. It is something that is recommended. I said, except the Hanabila. I said, and even the Hanabila, they said salat in jama'ah. Right? They say in a congregation, it is an obligation. I said, no, I can make a congregation with one more person. I can make a congregation with my wife. I can make a congregation with my family. I was like, but that's not in the masjid. And I said, even after all of these years, 1,200 years plus now, the masajid are still full. No, they know that it's sunnah and the masajid are still full. I said, we have to learn to be honest with rulings. Like, it's very important for us to be academically honest with these rulings, because if you make everything important, guess what? Then nothing's important. So we have to make sure that the things that are really important, that we actually give them importance. What is important? Making the salawat al-maktuba, making the obligatory prayers in their windows on time. That is what an obligation is. Anything above and beyond that, no problem. It's like, no, I want to pray as soon as the time comes in. Okay, go ahead, no problem. And well, is there a reward for someone who wants to make the prayer as soon as it comes in and wants to do it quick? Yeah, sure, of course. And this is someone who gives their prayer importance. Like, what about someone who prays toward the end of the time? Is he praying it in the window? Yes, okay, he's praying it on time. Right? You can't fault that person. So it's like I said, it's important to kind of be honest in some of these discussions. Like, is there a better way to do things? Is there sunnah? Yes, absolutely. Those things are there. But obligations will always be and forever be obligations. And things that are prohibited will always be and forever prohibited. Don't start adding things to it thinking that this is going to change people's minds, because if you, like I said, if everything's important, that means nothing's important.
But is there a hadith that says where the praying early during that window is better than...
Yeah, there's some, like, you have, like, what does early mean? This is the problem.
I mean, at the beginning of the window.
Sure. 10 minutes?
10
10 minutes?
when you can pray at
Half hour? The first half hour?
Uh,
Right, it's difficult to get, it's very subjective. It's very subjective.
So that basically it's our interpretation.
Yes.
that,
Yeah, absolutely.
It's better to do it
I will say for sure, and this is something that is agreed upon, when is the best time to pray? The best time to pray is when you can pray comfortably without worrying about the second prayer time and entering. That is agreed on. So I would roughly say, as long as I have a half hour until the next prayer, I have done nothing wrong. Because I'm able to pray comfortably, I can pray with khushu', and I'm not worried about, oh man, the next prayer time is about to start. Because even if I do that, yani, let's say I start my prayer, I finish 2 rak'ah of dhuhr and asr time starts. Is my dhuhr ada or qada? Am I making it up or am I making it on time?
On time.
I'm making it on time. Why? Because I started on time. So even in that situation, my prayer is still valid, but it's still better.
Not to.
Right, it's better not to do that, right? It shouldn't look like, okay, because the moment I finish that prayer, what can I do? I can stand up and I can pray. Right, this is not how the Prophet ﷺ prayed, right? This is not how the companions prayed. Like, they wouldn't constantly. Can that happen sometimes? Sure, right? It happens. Some of us, like, because we get busy. Sometimes, we're tired. Sometimes we're going to delay it. Sometimes it's really hot, right? There are different reasons for that, and that's completely fine, and those are completely reasonable. But like I said, like, even like praying early, I would say praying early, to me, it means that, okay, well, I'm praying and there's still plenty of time until the next prayer, right? That's still early. What does late look like? Late looks like, okay, there's only 10 minutes until Maghrib, right? That's now I'm starting to push it a little bit. So I think that's something that we should be aware of. قال حدثنا يحيى ابن أيوب وقتيبة ابن سعيد وعلي ابن حجر كلهم عن إسماعيل قال ابن أيوب قال حدثنا إسماعيل ابن جعفر قال أخبرني العلاء ابن عبد الرحمن ابن يعقوب مولى الحرقاء عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة أن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الصلاة الخمس والجمعة إلى الجمعة كفارة لما بينهن ما لم تخشى الكبائر. So over here, Abu Hurairah, he narrates to us that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said that the 5 daily prayers from Jum'ah to Jum'ah is an expiation for what is between them, as long as an individual does not commit or stays away from the major sins. طيب. There's a few more hadith here. قال حدثني نصر بن علي الجحظمي قال أخبرنا عبد الأعلى قال حدثنا هشام بن محمد عن أبي هريرة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال so Abu Hurairah, he narrates that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said الصلوات الخمس والجمعة إلى الجمعة كفارة لما بينهن, that the 5 daily prayers and from Jum'ah to Jum'ah is a expiation for what is between them. قال حدثنا أبو طاهر وهارون بن سعيد الأيلي قال حدثنا ابن وهب عن أبي صخر عن عمر بن إسحاق مولى زائدة حدثه عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يقول. So Abu Hurairah, he said that the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم used to say الصلوات الخمس والجمعة إلى الجمعة ورمضان إلى رمضان مكفرات ما بينهن إذا اجتنبت الكبائر. So over here he says that the 5 daily prayers from Jum'ah to Jum'ah, from Ramadan to Ramadan, they're an expiation for what is between them, as long as an individual stays away from the major sins. So over here, if I can't use those as a means to take care of my minor sins, right? So
Meaning you cannot have an excuse.
right. It's like and sometimes people do this, right? You have people, like I remember when I was in Pakistan, there was this police officer who used to make his like daily prayers, right? 5 daily prayers, and he used to take bribes, right? Right? And you wonder sometimes, like, why does that cognitive dissonance exist? Like, okay, how come it's like, okay, I can make these prayers and I can still take advantage of people? Like, how does that work? Because of things like this, right? Like, well, I pray, right? I fast, like I do all the things that I'm supposed to. Okay, so what if I do this? Allah will forgive me, huh?
I can sell alcohol. I can pay zakat.
Oh, I can. Oh, if I sell something haram, it's okay. I'll just pay. I'll pay this zakat. It'll purify the rest of the money. Allah protect us. Man. Allah protect us.
But then the bribe thing, you can eliminate that because typically any sin against other people is not forgiven automatically. Right?
Sure.
So the bribe wouldn't fall even under.
Yeah. So, oh man. So this gets a little. It gets a little problematic. I remember I had this. I think there's a couple elderly men who had a problem with me saying this too. If I take from the rights of others, can Allah forgive me?
Again, if you take rights of others.
Will is different, right? I don't even know if Allah will forgive me for normal sins, right? Can Allah forgive me if I take from the rights of others? If I steal from someone, if I hurt someone, if I took advantage of someone? Is it possible that Allah forgives me?
Yeah.
If he wants to,
Okay.
he can make the other person forgive you by giving them some reward.
By forcing them?
No, not forcing them, but on the day of judgment, he can make them, give them some reward, whatever, right?
Sure.
Equivalent, so that they end up forgiving you.
So it's a difficult conversation because we want to feel like our rights should never be violated, right? And that's why it makes it so hard. And we know of situations where people, and we wouldn't feel it is just, right? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't return that to us. But the way I like to kind of put a perspective on this is that I cannot prevent anybody's entry into paradise, just like I cannot force their entry into the hellfire. That ultimately is for who?
Allah.
That's for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for these individual squabbles, then there is accountability for those. There's no doubt about it. But if a person, for example, stole from someone else, and he in his heart is like, I'm not going to forgive this person. He knows exactly who it is, and I'm going to get my right on Yawm al-Qiyamah. If a person doesn't forgive him, what will happen is an exchange of rights, right? This person who is taken advantage of, what's going to happen? He's going to get his right. There's no doubt about it. But does getting him right mean that this person is prevented from entering paradise? Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
I mean, he will get his right, but
yes,
it's not preventing him going.
Exactly. And I think that is the best way that I feel that to kind of conceptualize this idea, because sometimes we think it's like, oh well, no, you can't forgive. Okay, but can you stop him from going to paradise? Like, can you force him into hellfire? Right? Like, we don't have any control. Ultimately, that's for who? Allah. That's Allah's right alone.
And he's most just on make the rights.
Right? That is his right alone. But as for these individual squabbles that we have between each other, this is something for us to manage. This is something for us to deal with, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide justice in that domain. But just because I get my right or this person gets their right, this does not ultimately decide my
I think
end.
it says perfectly right.
Yeah.
Preventing getting to Jannah and getting your right is two different.
These are two different things. These are two
So,
different things.
If the person understands that, yeah, you'll get your haq, whatever it is.
But his akhirah.
Because I know there was a part that says when you go to Jannah, like let's say someone killed you and then he's in Jannah, so you're
you're gonna be like, what the heck?
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's like, man, this guy, it's like, this guy killed me, or like, it's like he made it, really? But yeah, subhanallah. Obviously the ideal situation is to seek forgiveness in this world. Sometimes there are situations where you can't, right? Like there are situations where you literally can't seek forgiveness in this world. The very famously the ḥadith of the man who killed 99 men, right? He couldn't seek forgiveness from the people who he killed, right? That's not realistic. So eventually, who did he seek forgiveness from? But he asked the scholar, right? He asked the scholar, like, okay, well, what do I do? I went to. Yeah, the first one said, "There's no tawbah for you." He's like, you know what? I'm just gonna make it an even 100. But at the end of the day, I think that's a perfect example of like, okay, he took the rights of 100 people, right? He took the rights of 100 people. And even then,
Allah's mercy.
right? Allah was merciful and allowed him into his paradise. Does that mean that those 100 people will not be returned their right? No, that's not what that means. That means that they will get their right. There's no doubt about it, right? Inshallah, they're going to get their right, but that is not enough to prevent him from entering into paradise. Because this idea of ghufran, right, and forgiveness, it is something that is very uniquely between a slave and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us all. Ameen. قال حدثنا يحيى بن أيوب وقتيبة بن سعيد وعلي بن حجر كلهم عن إسماعيل قال ابن أيوب قال حدثنا إسماعيل بن جعفر قال أخبرني العلاء بن عبد الرحمن بن يعقوب مولى حرقة عن أبيه عن أبي هريرة أن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم قال. So over here, the Prophet the Messenger of Allah said, الصلوات الخمس وجمعة إلى الجمعة كفارة لما بينهن ما لم تخشى الكبائر. Did we do this hadith? Yes, we did. I'm sorry. قال حدثني محمد بن حاتم بن ميمون قال حدثنا عبد الرحمن بن مهدي قال حدثنا معاوية بن صالح عن ربيع يعني ابن يزيد عن أبي إدريس الخولاني عن عقبة بن عامر حاوى تحويل الإسناد وحدثني أبو عثمان عن جبير بن نفير عن عقبة بن عامر قال كانت علينا رعاية الإبل. So over here, Uqba, he says that I was put in charge over herding the camels. فجاءت نوبتي فروحتها بعشي. So he said his camel came and he gave it some hay, yes, like hay or straw. فأدركت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قائما يحدث الناس. So he said that as I was feeding it, I came across the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم as he was speaking to people. فأدركت من قوله, and I overheard him saying, so he had already started speaking, and I said I overheard him saying, ما من مسلم يتوضأ فيحسن وضوءه ثم يقول فيصلي ركعتين. So he said that ثم يقوم فيصلي ركعتين. He says that there is not a Muslim except that he makes wudu and he perfects it. Then he stands to pray 2 rak'ah مقبل عليهما بقلبه ووجهه, that he faces it with his person and with his heart. Meaning that a person is his intention is sincerely to make those 2 prayers for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إلا وجبت له الجنة, except that paradise becomes obligatory upon him, meaning that he is deserving of paradise. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all deserving. Ameen. قال فقلت, so he said, so I said, ما أجود هذه. He says, how beautiful is this? How amazing is this? فإذا قائل بين يدي يقول التي قبلها أجود. So he says that somebody else, he goes to him, he's like, no, it's even better than that. He's like, what an amazing thing. He's like, no, it's even better than that. فنظرت فإذا عمر. He says that I looked and it was Umar. قال إني قد رأيتك جئت آنفا. He said, I saw that you just came. ما منكم من أحد يتوضأ فيبلغ أو فيسبغ الوضوء ثم يقول أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله إلا فتحت له أبواب الجنة 8 يدخل من أيها شاء. He says that in this is what's even more beautiful. He says that there is not an individual from amongst you that makes wudu and perfects it, except that he says, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله. He says that I bear witness that there is no God except Allah, and that Muhammad is Allah's slave and his messenger. إلا فتحت له أبواب الجنة 8. He said, except that the 8 doors of paradise are open for him. يدخل من أيها شاء. That he is able to enter whichever one he chooses. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from them. قال حدثنا أبو بكر ابن أبي شيبة قال حدثنا زيد بن حباب قال حدثنا معاوية ابن صالح عن ربيع ابن يزيد عن أبي إدريس الخولاني وأبي عثمان عن جبير ابن نفير ابن مالك الحضرمي عن عقبة ابن عامر الجهني أن الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم قال فذكر مثله غير أنه قال. He says that, so in this narration he says that everything was the same except his statement من توضأ فقال, يعني whoever makes wudu and says أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. So over here instead of Abdullah wa Rasuli he says عبده ورسوله. Otherwise it's pretty much the same dua.
So all these hadiths about doing something and entering Jannah, they don't mean that you're not going to go to hell potentially. It's not going to stop for me.
Yeah, man, and Allah protect us. But you have all of these hadiths talking about doing all of these simple actions, right? And then an individual could just enter paradise. is it possible that after a person comes out, that he's given all of these virtues and he's given all of these blessings? It's possible, right? That after an individual goes through that, right? So if an individual is punished and they're put in the hellfire, then he's taken out, and it's said to him, okay, you are from the ones that you're from the ones that made wudu, you're from the ones that prayed, you're from the ones that, used to say after wudu, used to do ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu. These are the gates of paradise. Choose which one you would like to enter from. Possible, right? I don't think it's far fetched, because even all the other hadith that talk about oh, it removes your sins, and that you that this is a purification for you, except if you avoid the kaba'ir, right? Except for an individual who falls into a kabira, falls into a major sin. We didn't talk about what a major sin is.
I was going to ask you about it.
What is a kabira? Oh, man.
And like the major sins is
Sure.
And I thought like a whole nother a topic.
Yeah. I mean, we have a little bit of time. What's really interesting though is about. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Alhamdulillah. So a kabira. What's interesting is that I believe that the kaba'ir are those things that are very clearly mentioned by Allah and His Messenger. So, lying, stealing, backbiting, murder, zina, right? I think these are very, very clear, and these are known to be the kaba'ir. As time goes on, you find that the lists of kaba'ir get longer and longer. So if you look to the earlier books that talk about kaba'ir, they're not that long. It's like 10, 15, something like that. And then by the time you get to Imam al-Dhahabi, it's like a list of 120 or something.
How far from that to
So-
Imam al-Dhahabi?
So Imam al-Dhahabi, he died, I want to say 748. Right? So he's much after the Prophet ﷺ. It's like 748 after Hijrah. So you're talking about 700 years after the Prophet ﷺ. So what I mean?
120. Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have Ibn Hajar al-Haythami. He was around that time as well. He has a long list of kaba'ir as well. Some of the kaba'ir are they sound so close. Some of them are the one who shaves his beard and stuff. So it's and you're just man, you're kind of reaching. You know what I mean? You're looking for kaba'ir. I think the other problem is how a kabira is defined. So what happened is that the scholars, they start, obviously you look for patterns, right? You're okay, how do you define what a kabira is? How do you define what a major sin is? So they started looking for different patterns, and they're okay, any sin that is mentioned with a wa'd or wa'id, right? So any sin that's mentioned with a punishment, whether it be spiritual or physical, then that is a kabira, and that's a major sin. I mean, okay, what is the punishment for someone who disrespects their parents? Right? There's a punishment for stealing. There's a punishment for zina. Is there a punishment for, like I said, disrespecting your parents? There's not. Is there a punishment for a woman who doesn't take hijab? There's not, right? So you have to start asking, you have to start wondering, okay, does this really, when you start to scrutinize it a little bit, does it really stand up to the scrutiny? Backbiting. Is a person lashed for backbiting? No, right? There are certain things that just don't have a punishment associated with them.
It's a sin, but not direct.
Yeah, no. In here, I'm sorry. I went to before I.
So not a punishment. It's a sin.
Yeah. No. Yes. Absolutely, 100%. There are spiritual punishments associated with these. There's no doubt about it, right? But in terms of a worldly punishment, they don't exist. They're not there. So when you talk about a kabira, I think a kabira is something that we as Muslims, as a community, that there is ijma', there's a consensus to the prohibition of these items. And what is there ijma' on? There is ijma' on lying, there's an ijma' on stealing, there's an ijma' on murder, there's an ijma' on backbiting, there's an ijma' on tail carrying, namima, there's an ijma' on zina. These are very, very clear, 100%. all of these other things that people like to, kind of include in the list, like I said, and I very much stick by this. If everything's important, nothing's important, and it's important to kind of understand, like, okay, yeah, there's definitely is a grading for things. How do you deal with those gradings? Like, what do you determine is something that would be considered a major sin? What is not considered a major sin? It's important to know that the major sins are things that we have to make a special effort to stay away from, right? Like, drinking alcohol, eating pig, right? These things are very clear, and I don't believe that requires a lot of, like, okay, well, what is the ruling on this? Sometimes, if I have a difference of opinion on something, can it be a kabira? Right? It doesn't make sense. Like, if I have a difference of opinion on something, like, how's that a kabira? A very, very clear, controversial example: listening to music. There's a difference of opinion. Can it be a kabira if there's a difference of opinion on this? To me, some of this stuff, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't sit well. Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. So over here, Imam Nawawi, and we'll just close with this very quickly. So he mentions some ahkam or some rulings that he extracts from this hadith. He says, أما أحكام الحديث ففيه أنه يستحب للمتوضي أن يقول عقب وضوئه أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. So over here he says that it is recommended to say after every wudu, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. He says وينبغي أن ينضم إليه ما جاء في رواية الترمذي متصل بهذا الإسناد. So he says that there is another narration that Imam al-Tirmidhi mentions. He says that if you add this, then this is something that is good to add on to. اللهم اجعلني من التوابين واجعلني من المتطهرين. That, oh Allah, make me from those who constantly come back to you and make tawbah, and those individuals that constantly are in tahara and constantly purifying themselves. And he says, وَيُسْتَحَبْ أَن يَنضَمْ إِلَيْهِ مَا رَوَاهُ النَّسَائِي فِي كِتَابِ عَمَلِ الْيَوْمِ اللَّيْلَةِ. He says that there's a narration Imam al-Nasa'i mentions in his book Amal al-Yawm al-Layla. So there are a few books of dua historically that are very important. From them is this Amal al-Yawm al-Layla by Imam al-Nasa'i's very early work. He says, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وحدك لا شريك لك وأستغفرك وأتوب إليك. So he says if you add this as well, this is something that's recommended. قال أصحابنا, and he says that he says my companions from the Shafi'is وتستحب هذه الأذكار للمغتسل أيضا والله أعلم. He says that, and this also applies for an individual who makes ghusl, and Allah knows best. We'll stop here inshallah. After the salah we'll come back and we'll have our tazkiyah class. Allahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin.